Hello everyone. This is a re-recording of the summer Salon presentation at the Platonic Academy of Melbourne, summer 2026. We're re-recording it because the recording didn't come out so well. So here it goes, the same speech that I gave on Saturday. So welcome to the end of the summer Salon, and I'm going to talk about Plato and Transcendence. And I'm doing that because we had a speaker scheduled, but he was unable to come. He pulled out, and so I thought I'd have a go at the topic. And I know he was sympathetic with, he saw sympathies at least between Platonism and Eastern mysticism. And I also see great sympathies there. Indeed, what makes the West distinctly Western is the prevailing Aristotelianism, which is the Aristotelianism that also obscures Platonism. But speaking about transcendence, whether it's Eastern or Platonic or otherwise, is never very easy. I was keen to see how Fabio would approach it, but then he pulled out. And so now I'm going to see how I approach it. So I'm going to give it a go, but not without apprehension. I would not normally speak on this topic at a public forum. Transcendence of any kind in any tradition is hard to approach with words. Like, what are you going to talk about today, Bernie? I'm going to talk about what can't be talked about. How are you going to talk about it then? You can point to it. Point to a shared awareness. But of course, if there's no shared awareness, then it's pointless. It just sounds silly. You can't just dive straight into it. But here's what's wonderful about Plato. You don't have to. When first reading the dialogues, you can follow the discussion at more or less a superficial level, as we mostly do in our classes, and only later come to the deeper stuff when you're ready. Or maybe not at all. At first reading, you see the drama of the discussion, a wordy play, playful, funny, silly. You follow the argument, which are curious in themselves, sometimes familiar, sometimes obscure and convoluted. Maybe you want to skip those, sometimes just silly. But then it's like, hang on a minute, what's going on here? The arguments are all demolished. The trickster Socrates is messing with you. Then the very Socratic method itself, using reason to find truth, this is demolished. The trickster Plato is messing with you. What's really going on here? Plato is messing with you to break you out of your habitual beliefs. Your habitual ways of thinking are demolished. You're left in aporia, no way forward. But then some hint of a path to transcendence. The realization is that you've been looking for the answer in the wrong place, in the wrong direction. The path is the other way. But you must take the path yourself. Plato's not going to give it to you on a plate because he can't. Because it's transcendent. He can only point you in the right direction. Because you already have the wisdom within you. You just need to pay it some attention. Esoteric, yes. Transcendent, yes. Beyond senses, yes, beyond words, beyond argument, but there all along within you. At this salon, I might presume a casual interest in Platonic esotericism. You came here to this talk after all, or perhaps you came for the cake. Still, there are so many difficulties for me and for you as an audience. I rarely see successful public speaking about transcendence. Does anyone know Alan Watts? Perhaps he did it best. Long ago, I used to read Alan Watts's marvelous books, but then there are all these public talks on the internet that he gave in the 50s and the 60s on Zen Buddhism, on Taoism. He was a very artful speaker, but not a Platonist. In Platonism, there are, of course, the Neoplatonists. Plotinus is all about transcendence. And there are others, including Christians, Nicholas of Cusa. But we're not going to start there today. Today, we will engage directly with Plato's dialogues. They're enough. So, that's enough hedging. Are we ready to get into it? Let's start with the allegory of the cave in Plato's Republic. Perhaps you've heard of it. It's very well known. The allegory is in Book 7 of the Republic, deep within this section where Socrates is giving the great lesson, approaching the highest teaching about the ultimate unity of all. Because he's talking about good, the good society, he calls it the form of the good, and it transcends being and knowing. So it can only be approached, and only approached, through allegory. Socrates uses the metaphor of light and sight. Sunlight in our sight stands for all the senses. And by analogy, it is also stands for insight, introspection. Notice how we still use these analogies today. So the allegory is an allegory of light, sight, insight, enlightenment. Now you might know the scene. There are these prisoners looking at a wall, and their heads are fixed, their arms are fixed. They can't even see each other looking, and they're looking at these flickering shadows on the wall. That is objectified, sensible reality. You know, like the mess in this room, right? The chairs, the table, all the things around, the stairs, the street outside. Sensible reality is just flickering shadows on the wall. But you wouldn't know it unless one of the prisoners is released and stands up and is blinded, looking around behind him. Eventually his eyes adjust and he sees what's going on. There's a fire and there's shapes being moved along a passageway so that the fire is projecting the shadows of the shapes on the wall, and that is objectified reality being projected onto the wall. Next thing that happens is that he's dragged out of the cave into the sunlight, blinded again. And all he can see at first is just, he sees at night time, or he sees shadows and reflections, and his eyes adjust and he can see the trees. And eventually, after some time, he can look directly at the sun. And he realizes that the sun is the source of everything in this outside world, but also the source of everything in the cave as well. So this is where you have the world of forms outside, and inside you have the world of objectified reality. And the sun is the source of all that, emanating from that to give our objectified reality. For Plato, we are fixated on this objectified sensible reality, thinking that it is reality itself, that it has a reality in itself. We must turn around the mind's eye to see the higher reality of which this is a mere projection, and then spend some time contemplating this higher reality in and of itself. Leave the cave, spend some time in the pure light of the sun, spend some time up there in meditation. The enlightened philosopher then returns to the cave, blinded again. But when his eyes adjust to the darkness, he can see sensible things as they really are. He sees them as projections of forms. Now, what do we mean by forms? We'll get to that in a moment, but just think of abstract concepts. Now, notice that this sensible reality is not an illusion as such. Some Eastern mystics, or at least they're interpreted this way, see sensible reality as a fiction, a fantasy. The life I live with my friends and family, fiction. Going to work every day, an illusion. The bombs in Iran, an illusion. I eat, I shit, I get sick, I care for my aging mother. It's all not real. That's not Plato's view. What is a fiction for Plato is that this reality, this flickering shadows on the wall in the allegory, is real in itself. The objectified reality having an independent external essence in itself. That is wrong. That is an illusion, according to Plato. And this is very different, of course, from the normal view. The normal view in modern philosophy is like, sure, there's the appearance of things, but then there's some essential independent reality that all these objects have, like my cup, it has certain appearances in different light or from different points of view, but it has a reality in itself, a material reality independent of my observation of it. Now, this is materialism broadly defined. From the Platonic point of view, most philosophies are materialistic in this sense. Most modern philosophy is materialistic, and this is what is rejected by Plato. This is not the Platonic view. The Platonic view is that there is no independent material reality of things in an external world beyond my experience of them. But Plato does say that our experienced world does not say, I should say, that our experienced world is an illusion. Plato does say these objects are projected constructions of elementary insensible forms. Forms are what we use to make sense of our experience. They are what we use to build our reality. And so they become our reality. So our objectified reality is real, not an illusion, but only less real than the reality of forms from which we have constructed them. Still, that's pretty crazy, right? It should sound crazy. Perhaps it's mad. Perhaps Platonic mysticism is not for you. Anyway, this assessment, it's crazy, is anticipated in the allegory of the cave. It's part of the problem, right? When the prisoner stands up and tells what he's seen, the other prisoners think he has lost his mind. And when the prisoner returns from going out into the real sunlight and tries to explain what he saw up there, his madness is confirmed. For Plato, sensible things are constructed by the observer, the observing eye. I construct my reality from forms that I, as observer, already have. I already have these forms before I make the construction. Now, it might help. Think of a newborn baby. It can't see things when it's born. To do that, it must first make sense of its experience in its senses. In its senses, which are in itself, right? Its senses are in itself. The baby has some tools to use to make sense of its experience, to work with, to make sense of its experience of itself. It constructs its objects and they become its reality. Now that is the view of Jean Piaget, the child development theorist, and his followers, who are called radical constructivists. We can think of the baby with its experience, or we can make an inquiry ourselves, make an introspection, use insight, turn our mind's eye around in a meditation so that we can see what forms are in themselves. We can see the forms in themselves. When the soul inquires alone by itself, it departs into the realm of the pure, the everlasting, the immortal and the changeless, and being kin to these, it dwells always with them whenever it is by itself, unhindered, at rest from its wanderings. This state is called wisdom, is it not so? So says Socrates in the Phaedo. For Plato, the problem of the cave is firstly that it's hard to even turn the mind's eye around, and secondly, it's even harder to leave the cave and see the form of reality in itself. Remember, the prisoner had to be dragged out. We're so engaged with the flickering shadows on the wall, so invested with them, that it's hard to turn around from them, turn away from them. Plato recommends that for a time at least we do this, that I inquire alone by myself in the realm of the pure, the everlasting, the immortal, turning from the objectified reality and leave the cave. What's this? What does it sound like? A meditation practice? In Plato, there is not much in the way of a description of meditation practice. There is the quote I read out from the Phaedo, for example, and there's a few other passages. There's the accounts of Socrates staring blankly into space for hours. But not much else. Not like in Hinduism. not like in Buddhism. In Zen, the talk is all about practice. If it's not some riddle, some koan, then it's about how to sit. Just sit. Zazen. I sometimes wonder that we should introduce a meditation practice at the Academy, and the School of Philosophy in Melbourne and London does this to its credit. So part of the problem is our fixation on objectified reality. We each set up and manage our objectified reality to make sense of our experience. We set it up as observer, observed, subject, object. And it works. Plato is not questioning that. It's not a fiction. It works. This projection works for me to make sense of my experience, to construct my reality so that it all works. But through meditation, you might experience the collapse of this objectified reality, the collapse of the observed into the observer. A collapse into direct, pure experience. The marvelous realization of this collapse comes with the awareness that my experience is experience of myself. My experience is experience of myself as other. I am that. I am that world experiencing itself as other. Wow, that's loopy. But it makes sense. Let's reason it out. All I experience is my experience. All I can experience is my experience. If I think that something in my experience is not my experience, then it can't be, because it's in my experience. Think about that. Or read Descartes' Meditations, or read Bishop Berkeley's Critique of Locke, or read Bertie Russell's Problems of Philosophy. They all come to the same conclusion, and it freaks them out. Also, the so-called Enlightenment, John Locke, David Hume, Immanuel Kant, it freaked them out. All I can possibly experience is my experience of myself. Get there by reasoning, if you like, or read Descartes' Meditations, or do Descartes' meditation. Get there through direct awareness, meditation, just sit, and then no proof is required. So, the first problem of transcendence is fixation on objectified reality. Seeing it as real in itself. It's not real in itself. It's a projection of an inner reality that I use to make sense of my experience of myself. I am that. The universe is me. I am my world observing myself. The fixation of objectified reality is one of the problems that Plato points to. Then there's a second fixation that he spends a lot of time talking about and dealing with. The fixation on speech. The fixation on words, on reason, what is in Plato called logos, meaning speech. And especially for us moderns, the problem is with silent speech, with thought, thinking in our modern way of living. Now remember, this is not anti-thinking per se. Thinking is good, right? Thinking about what I'm experiencing, making more sense of my experience, judging, deciding what to do, anticipating, planning ahead, even worrying can be good. But we can't stop it. We can't just turn it off. I wake up and I start thinking. I take a rest and I continue thinking. I fall asleep while thinking. These days, we take a break by diverting our thinking. We read a book, we watch Netflix, scrolling on the phone. I take a break from one sort of thinking to do another sort of thinking. When was the last time you just sat? When was the last time you just sat and let your thoughts ebb away? Or just walked? Or did you take the headphones? Perhaps driving. Or did you turn the radio on for company? Sitting on a train? Watching the river flow? Listening to the river flow? Listening to the trees? Notice how sometimes when your thoughts ebb away, that can be the most creative moment. You solve that problem that's been unsolved for so long. It comes in a flash. Or you find another way, lateral thinking. Perhaps our narrow, focused thinking about it gets in the way of the answer. But even more than that, what about unthinking consciousness? Being conscious, but not thinking. When was the last time you were awake, conscious, and without thinking? No thoughts, no words at all. Most of us can only do this in meditation. And even then it's hard. And the harder you try, the harder it is. But they say it's quite an exceptional way to be. Alone by yourself, the mind, unhindered from its rest, unhindered at rest from its wanderings. No projected reality, no thoughts, experience of yourself, yes, but no judgment of your experience, no remembering, no anticipation. So why am I pointing to this? Why do I say that unthinking awareness is important for Plato, for Platonic transcendence? In my view, this can really help us to understand Plato. Because Plato wants us to distinguish between the form of language, of speech, logos, and the form of knowledge, which is the form of the reality to which the speech refers. For Plato, logos, speech, reasoning, is not knowledge. Logos only gives an account of what we know. The account of what I know is not the knowledge itself. Just like the account of what I'm experiencing is not the experience itself. The account of reality is not the reality itself. Now, this can be obvious for some speaking about what I know, speaking about sensible reality, right? Like saying it's a sunny day outside. The account, the words are not the sunny day. Sunny, the word, day is not the sensible reality, okay? That I directly know. I know it's sunny, and I'm then describing it in the words. Sunny day. Well, this is the same for conceptual knowledge according to Plato. Formal knowledge is not in the reasoning. Reasoning only refers to it. Consider the formal sciences. Dare I mention mathematics? And a bunch of the audience will suddenly freeze up. But hey, simple mathematics. 1 + 1 = 2. Geometry. A square has 4 sides. These words I'm using, haven't drawn them on the board, these words I'm using are only giving account of the reality. Here it is, the formal reality, the relationship between 1 and 2. The knowledge and the reality are what the words or symbols refer to. I could use other symbols, couldn't I? I could use other words, another language, I could use a code. The knowledge of 1 + 1 = 2 is beyond the words describing it, but it is not in the sensible world. Where's 1 in the sensible world? Where's 2? I can give examples of 2. I can give 2 objects, right? I can give 2 anything, but where is 2 itself? It's not in the sensible world. And Plato says it's not in the words, it's not in the reasoning. It's mystical, beyond words and beyond sense. Some folks don't like to say that arithmetic is mystical. They don't like to found mathematics in the mystic. But this is the higher reality for Plato. Insensible, beyond time and space, universally known, it never is born and never dies. It's always there in the background. And we can come to it also through ordinary conceptual thinking, conceptual reasoning. Think of abstract concepts like justice, beauty, goodness. Are they more than their definition? Plato implores us to see that they are clearly separate from their definition. Try to define justice. How would you define justice? What words would you use? Notice you know what justice is before you define it. Notice you're trying to find the words to define what you already know. But next, try something much more elementary, like equal. Define it. Equal is the same. Yeah? What's the same? The same is identical. What does identical mean? It means the same. We all know what equal is before we try to find the words, before we reason about it. If I fail to define what equal means, does that mean I don't know it? Of course not. Plato is asking us to try to see clearly the difference between what I know and what I reason about what I know. If you don't see the difference clearly, then you get confused. Modern philosophy suffers this confusion. Modern philosophy abhors a mystical ground. Modern philosophy tends to reduce the form of knowledge to the form of reasoning. For Plato, reasoning is only the form of communication. We only communicate our knowledge using language. Language points to it, names it, but the linguistic account of it is not it. Yes, language is how I bring my construction of my reality to yours, how we find communion between our different constructions and adjust them accordingly within cultures, through language, and in all sorts of other ways. We communicate and modify our constructions with each other. And kind of that's what we're doing right now, right? Maybe you see it this way. Try seeing it this other way. Communication, talking about our constructions of reality. I'm bringing my construction into harmony with yours and with everybody else's. Of course, only if you want to play. You need two to play this game of communication. But the thing we need to recognize is that we each have our own experience that we're communicating about. I know, and I know what I experience directly, but I don't directly know what you experience. I don't know what you say when you say you see red. You say you see red, but I don't know what you see. What do you see when you see red? Can you tell me what you see so I know? You say red. Is your red the same as my red? I'll never know. I can never really know what you see when you say you see red, but I don't need to. It's sufficient for me to presume that you see something similar to what I see, and this presumption is confirmed through our every communication. All such presumptions are confirmed through communication, including what you mean when you say justice, beauty, equal, red. So why is it important to see this difference between speech, thinking, and knowledge being? Because too much trust in the form of reasonable communication is dangerous. Like in Plato's Athens, all the boys are sent off to train in rhetoric so that they can win debates. In the courts, in the senates, in the agora. Important decisions of state were decided by debate. Life and death in the courts, war or no war in the Senate, the winning argument wins. At least that's the idea. Plato warns, if we trust too much in logos, reason, argument, then we lose touch with the reality that the reasoning is supposed to be talking about. If you think that the reason is the knowledge, then you lose touch with the reality. Perhaps someone told you that Plato is a rationalist. No way. He was forever warning against the having trust in reason. That is why his Socrates is such an annoying trickster. That is why there is so much irony in what Socrates is arguing in the dialogues. It's fairly easy to pick up. Just as the truth of the sunny day is beyond the words describing it, so is red beyond the word red, so is the truth of justice, beauty, goodness, and we need to find this truth, this formal truth, because this is what it's all about, according to Plato. What is the good society? What is the just society? You need to know what justice is. You need to know what goodness is. The separate reality of abstract concepts is most readily seen in mathematics, with simple geometry and arithmetic. Mathematics does not have the form of linguistic reasoning. Mathematics does not reduce to linguistic reasoning. That is why there was 100 years ago such an effort to reduce mathematics to logic. Bertrand Russell, Frege, they wanted to show that all knowledge is reasonable, that knowledge is logical, and they wanted to dismiss any sense of a mystical ground. This project failed spectacularly, and long before Gödel proved that it could not be done. So, Platonic mysticism requires not only release from fixation on the objectified sensible reality, the flickering shadows on the wall, it also requires release from a fixation on speech and speech-like thought. And that is why I believe meditation can help us moderns to find the Platonic path to transcendence. Because it helps to see speech for what it really is. It helps to see objectified reality for what it really is. And to see beyond them to the higher reality, the reality of the forms. And so this brings us to forms. We are on Plato's path to transcendence. We are releasing ourselves from fixation to the shadows and to speech. And so then, what are we turning our mind's eye towards? To the higher formal reality. And what is this formal reality? In what sense do forms exist? There is so much misunderstanding about this. And most of this misunderstanding about forms can be traced back to Aristotle, to Aristotle's interpretation of what forms are, what Platonic forms are, and then his damning critique of them. Aristotle rejected the Pythagorean and Platonic mysticism, the mathematical mysticism, and to Aristotle's critique of this mysticism rejects the mysticism that came before him and introduced his new materialist approach. So let's forget Aristotle. Let's forget what perhaps you've already been told at university or elsewhere about forms, about Platonic forms. Let's approach it instead the way Plato approaches it in the dialogues. And this is why I always say, let's read the dialogues directly. What is the good life? What is the just life? What is a just society? Good society, beautiful, beautiful boy, beauty in itself. What is this? Now think of it in terms of the language. We've got good life, just society, beautiful, beloved boy. Adjectives. Turn the adjectives into nouns. The good, justice, beauty itself. What are these? Pay attention to what these names refer to. This is one way to start to turn around the mind's eye to see the formal reality outside the cave. This turning around of the mind's eye, this turning the adjectives into nouns, which Plato does in the dialogues, and considering these abstracts for what they are, is a way a pathway to Plato's forms. What is justice in itself? What is goodness in itself? What is the essence of beauty? So one way to start turning around is to look at these abstract concepts. Another way to turn around the mind's eye is to look at relations between things. The relations between things, the relativity of things to each other, greater and smaller, the limit of things, the cracks that let the light in. The form, not the content, is the way to see that all is form. The relations, ratio, proportions, proportion is what Pythagorean geometry is all about. And you'll see this more clearly if you take our Introduction to Geometry course, which we're starting after Easter. But just for now, the Pythagoreans saw this in musical ratio before Plato, by the way. In the principle of harmony, 1:2, the octave. 2:3, the ratio of the fifth tone, the dominant tone in the scale. 3:4, the fourth tone, subdominant. Abstract concepts. Think, where is the ratio 1:2? Can you see it? Can you feel it? Did it come into being at some time and go away sometime? In the octave, it's in the octave. The octave is always there in nature, in all reality. And what is the musical octave? Well, let me show you. If I took a piece of string and plucked it, and then halved it and plucked it again, up an octave. If I take a metal bar on a xylophone, hit it, cut it in half, hit it again, up an octave. The Pythagoreans thought they had discovered the mathematical laws of nature. And they had. Formal laws, insensible laws, expressed in, exemplified by every vibrating object. And go and check out modern particle physics. It's not about particles. It's about resonance, and harmony. Now, consider the simple circle, expressed in every circular thing. Every particular circle participates that formal circle, right? Wheel on a car, the circular clock, the circle at the top of my cup. It expresses, it participates in, as Plato would say, the form of the circle. The relation of participation can also be seen as likeness. Think of likeness, the likeness of two things. It's made up of the ways in which they're the same and the ways in which they're different. So take all of these examples of circles that you've ever seen and consider the ways that they are the same. And the ways that they are the same is the form of the circle. That's a way to come to the form. The ideal circle is what they all those particular circles have in common. The form of the circle is the likeness of its every expression. Now let's consider the circle more carefully. Everywhere on the circle is in the same place, in relation to the center. And if you draw a circle, and I'll draw one now, And if you draw a circle, right, it's not a perfect circle. You can tell because you know the form of the circle, right? If you draw a circle, then you can see that it expresses simply perfect containment inside and outside. And notice, right, that inside is inside in that it's not outside, and outside is outside in that it's not inside. And this expresses a very elementary form for Plato. You see it in the Euthyphro, where they're talking about piety, where he's imploring Euthyphro, we may not know what piety means, but there's one thing that we do know. Piety is itself and not impiety. Right? At least we know that about it. And we know that about everything that we can name. Every object, every class of objects, every concept, every distinction, every mark on the wall. It is itself and not itself. If you can name it, you can distinguish it. And that's what you're doing before you name it. You're making a distinction, like inside from outside. Now, in class, I often use this analogy of an island in a sea. You have the island, and you have the sea, and you have the shoreline. The island is the island, the inside, but take away the sea, rub it out, there's no island. The island is itself in that it is not itself. If we say same and other, the other is in the same as its otherness. This is a very important form for Plato, and as we can see, everything nameable has this form. Now, this form is the basis of Plato's scientific methodology, his method of investigation, which he calls collection and division. The method of investigation is finding likeness and difference in our experience, in our constructed reality, and finding likenesses between individuals and differences and making the right cuts in the right places, in the right order, in the right hierarchy. Now we can think of this in terms of biological classification, which evolved from Plato's original work through Aristotle and so on. Just think, where do you make the cuts? Where's the right place to make the cuts? Whales, do you say they're fishes? Or do you say they're fish? Or do you say they're mammals? Where's the right place to make the right cuts in the right hierarchy? Making distinctions. And we can see how we could arrange things differently in our science, in our experience. Different languages sometimes arrange things differently, make the cuts in different places. Different cultures do it differently. The history of religion, the history of science, history of astronomy, if you know it, shows us this. And so does anthropology. But what stays the same? What's universal? The form of distinction. Something is itself and not itself. The same is itself and not its other. So forget what you've been told by Aristotle and the Aristotelians. This is what you find in Plato. This is the foundation. This is the foundation of Platonic science. The foundation of mathematics is here, according to Plato. So, What's form, right? What have we said? 1 plus 1 equals 2. That's formal. The circle itself, that's formal. Containment, inside, outside, just containment itself. Distinction, formal. Going around and coming back to the same place. Going around in circles or going straight. That's formal. The octave, 1:2. That's formal. And it's expressed everywhere, so many places in nature. All these things are expressed in nature. They are participated in our construction of our reality that we've done to make sense of our experience. Plato says, take your attention away from particular things. Don't start with objectified reality and see them as essential in themselves and start with that. Take yourself away from that, from the particularity of every object, and start looking at their likenesses, their formal likenesses, and that's your gateway. That's your gateway to the mystic, to see how all is form. This is the unseen universal reality that is always there, in every expression of it, but also in itself, insensible, outside time and space, outside the cave. This gives us the two realms of Plato, the realm of the sensible, inside the cave, which expresses the formal reality that is eternal, outside the cave, the realm of pure form. And they're intimately connected and ever present in our sensible reality is the formal reality in every circle, in every distinction. The formal reality is present there. And so this brings us finally to the eternal soul, this psyche or psyche, we might say. Let me finish with consideration of the immortal soul. Plato says that the soul is immortal. At least Socrates argues this in his dialogues, especially the Phaedo. What does he mean by the immortality of the soul? Let me tell you how I see this. Not everyone sees it this way, and not everyone in our academy. So let's start. What is immortal for Plato? So far, what's immortal for Plato? We've just said the forms. The forms as expressed in our reality, our objectified reality, the forms that we can experience in meditation, in doing pure mathematics, and so on. What is immortal in us? If the soul is immortal, then it must be formal, right? Because the forms are what are immortal. So let me ask a question. Does Plato think that the soul is something that is immortal? Does Plato think the soul is something that is immortal? The answer is no. No? No? No, because if the soul is immortal, then it can't be something, right? It can't be something. That's our tendency when we're talking about the transcendent, right? Is to bring it down and make it something. Plato's trying to push us beyond that instead of bringing back an idol, which is what it is, when you see it as something and it blocks the way to what is beyond. The soul is not, that is immortal, can't be, is not something in particular. It can't be something because things are not immortal. Only forms are immortal. Beauty itself, justice itself, the circle itself, Number 2. Number 3. Mathematics. And this is in the postcard. The soul is akin to the everlasting, the immortal. The immortal soul, whatever it is, can't be something in particular. But the ego self is something in particular. I'm something in particular. I'm Bernie, giving this talk on this day in Melbourne in 2026. I am particularly who I am, if you don't mind. The ego self, the personal self, like the bodily self, will die. The personal self will die. And that's sad. That's even frightening. The personality, the person, the social self, the person, me and you, given a name and so on, we can call it the ego self. Plato didn't use that term. It will die. That is why we must sing charms to it. We must sing charms to it, especially before it dies and before our friends and family members die. This is why we tell these marvelous tales about the afterlife. And we read some magnificent tales about the afterlife in Plato's dialogues, as the class is now reading in the course on Plato's myths. We must charm the ego self because it will die. Now remember how Socrates also says, much of this is in the Phaedo, which we'll be studying after Easter. He says that philosophy is the practicing of dying and being dead. The philosopher is already half dead anyway. Remember how Socrates says in this dialogue that the practice of philosophy is all about detachment from bodily concerns, breaking attachment to sensible reality, detaching from desires and fears, etc. in this world. Detachment from social vanities and aspirations. Philosophy is practicing being dead. The death of the bodily self and the death of the social self, the ego self, the personality, what we name in this room here today, you and me. He is saying that we should practice being dead to this. We should practice being dead to the particular self in that world. Wow. But what is it? And this comes up in Buddhism, Zen, and other Eastern practices as well. What is it that's doing the detachment? Well, we should at least, in a stage anyway, become aware of a deeper self that can observe this self that is participating in this world, right? The me in this world with a name. Find a deeper self that can observe this and become aware of what it really is. This is a non-ego self, a non-social self that never dies. And what is it? Well, let's not say too much about it. You need to do your inquiry and discover it, because if I talk too much about it, it will just distract you. But we can say that it is nothing at all. If you find something, then it's not it. What survives is no self, no thing. The answer to the riddle of immortality is nothing is immortal. Nothing is what is immortal. In Christian mysticism, this is expressed in various ways. You have the apophatic method, the negative method, denial, denial, denial. You also have Erasmus's teaching of the cross, the death of the bodily personal self, and resurrection in divinity. You can see this in early Christianity, but you can also see physical resurrection. For them, for the mystics, how profane an interpretation that is. You are born again to divinity, to immortality. Beyond observer observed, beyond being and knowing, beyond reasonable affirmation and negation, beyond itself and not itself. In this void, the individual soul finds union with the world soul, the true and deep connection between us all. The nothing at all is the oneness of all. Plato's practice is to turn around the mind's eye to see this, to stand up in the cave, to turn around and to practice looking this way, to leave the cave for some time, because there lies the path to transcendence.